Hare Krishna, everyone. So let's get started. Since we're scheduled to be start at 3, and we have a little bit time to buffer. Okay, welcome to the second astronomy tutorial with Srimad Bhagavatam session. My humble obeisances to you all. Today, I will walk you through 2 topics. And we will start with a topic related to Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj is the grandson of Svayambhuva Manu and a nephew of Priyavrata Maharaj, whom we talked about yesterday. Svayambhuva Manu is the first Manu in the current day of Lord Brahma. In fact, based on Srimad Bhagavatam chronology, he is the first ever Manu in Brahma's creation. Svayambhuva Manu has 2 sons and 3 daughters. So Dhruva Maharaj has a number of cousins. Among them are Kapila Muni, Yajna, and Sati. Kapila Muni and Yajna, both of them are avatars of Lord Vishnu. Sati is the dear wife of Lord Shiva. From the lineage of Dhruva Maharaj came the 6th Manu, Chakshusha, Prithu Maharaj, and the 10 Prachetas. Prithu Maharaj is also an avatar of Lord Vishnu, and the 10 Prachetas, they received direct instructions from Lord Shiva and pleased the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their mutual friendly relationship in devotional service. We know from Srimad Bhagavatam that Dhruva Maharaj left the royal palace for forest at the age of 5. And he attained yogic perfection after merely 6 months of practice, following Narada Muni's instruction. And he was awarded Dhruva Loka. Then he returned to his kingdom and ruled the earth for 36,000 years. Afterwards, he retired to Badarikashrama and absorbed himself completely in meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This picture shows Dhruva Maharaj sitting in an airplane. Nanda and Sunanda, 2 associates of Lord Vishnu, are accompanying him. His mother, Suniti, is going with him in the airplane flying behind. Where are they going? They're going to the abode of Lord Vishnu, named as Dhruva Loka. Based on Srimad Bhagavatam, Dhruva Loka is situated 3,800,000 yojanas above Bhumandala. If you remember yesterday's presentation, 3,800,000 yojanas is very close to the distance from the center of Bhumandala to the middle of the 5th island. Here is a description of Dhruvaloka. The Supreme Personality of Godhead continued, "My dear Dhruva, I shall award you the glowing planet known as the pole star, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium. No one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar systems, planets, and stars. All the luminaries in the sky circumambulate this planet, just as bulls tread around a central pole for the purpose of crushing grains. Keeping the pole star to their right, all the stars inhabited by the great sages like Dharma, Agni, Kashyapa, and Shukra circumambulate this planet, which continues to exist even after the dissolution of all others." In this verse, we see this word, Dhruva Kshiti, which is translated as pole star. Dhruva can mean fixed or eternal, and Kshiti means residence. So the word Dhruva Kshiti denotes an eternal residence. As is written in this verse, this place will remain until the end of the Kalpa Vasinam. And the constellations, planets, and stars revolve around it in a clockwise direction incessantly. This description may remind us of the star Polaris, commonly known as the pole star. It is the brightest star that appears nearest to the North Celestial Pole. The North Celestial Pole is the upper end of the Earth's spinning axis points to. However, if we equate the pole star Dhruva Kshiti with Polaris, we will run into problems. More than 2,000 years ago, a Greek astronomer, Hipparchus, discovered a phenomenon. Comparing observations more than a century apart, Hipparchus proposed that the axis around which the celestial sphere seemed to rotate daily shifted gradually over time, though very slowly. As we've mentioned, the Earth rotates on its axis in a counterclockwise direction every day, resulting in the day-night cycle on Earth. This is illustrated by these series of white arrows along the equators. At present, the north end of this spinning axis is nearly pointing at the star Polaris. The theory of precession of the equinoxes states that the spin axis itself rotates in a clockwise direction, centered on the pole of the ecliptic. So you can see the Earth spin counterclockwise and the axis spin clockwise. This rotation is something look like this. The rotating axis describes a cone in a somewhat same fashion as a spinning top. It is a very slow rotation according to the theory. One rotation takes about 26,000 years. This rotation of the Earth's spin axis has some obvious effects. The first one we will talk about is the changing pole star. Today, the pole star, the star closest to the North celestial pole, is Polaris. But it was not so in the past and will not be so in the future due to the precession. As you can see in this diagram, the present day pole star here is the tip of the handle of the Little Dipper, or the tail of the Little Bear in the constellation Ursa Minor. Some 5,000 years ago, here, in 3000 BC, for example, the pole star is this one, Thuban. It is in the tail of the dragon in the constellation Draco. Let me show you the position of the North celestial pole at different time. And give me a second. We'll again use this planetarian software. So this is basically where we are situated. And let's turn to north. Here is it. And let us take off the atmosphere so that we can see the sky. And let me pull also the equatorial grid. You can see the center here is the North celestial pole. And the concentric circles around the North celestial pole they are in parallel to equator. And you can see there is a star very close to the North celestial pole. It is Polaris. And if I speed up time, what we will see is the whole sky, all the stars and planets are rotating on this central pivot in a clockwise direction. If you see from above, we see from below is a counterclockwise direction. Now, let me also turn on the constellations labels and arts so that you can see here this constellation Ursa Minor is right at the tip of his tail. Okay. Now, let's go back in time. And while we go back in time, pay attention to where the North celestial pole is situated. First, let us go to 1900. This is the time of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Let's see, what is the sky that they're saying? So you see, this Polaris is drifted a little bit away from the north celestial pole. Now, let's go further back in time. Now we're going to see what Baladeva Vidyabhushana was seeing in 1800. Polaris is moving even further away from the north celestial pole. Now, back to 1500 is the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can see this Polaris is quite distant away from the north celestial pole. Go back a little bit even further to 1200. This is the time of Madhvacharya. And you see the Polaris is almost far, far away from the north celestial pole. Now, let's take one more step. We can go back to 5,000 years ago when Vyasadeva was compiling Srimad Bhagavatam and see what he was seeing. Wow, you can see this is Polaris over there, and the north celestial pole is here. The star that is very close to it is no longer Polaris, it's this star. This is Thuban. You can see this constellation in art, the depiction here. It is in the tail of the constellation Draco. And let me speed up time a little bit. You can see now everything is revolving around Thuban. Okay. So, what is the solution? Let's read again a couple of Bhagavatam verses on Dhruvaloka. Established by the supreme will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pole star, which is the planet of Maharaja Dhruva, constantly shines as the central pivot for all the stars and planets. The unsleeping, invisible, most powerful time factor causes these luminaries to revolve around the pole star without cessation. All the planets and all the hundreds and thousands of stars revolve around the pole star, the planet of Maharaja Dhruva, in their respective orbits, some higher and some lower, fastened by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the machine of material nature according to the results of their fruitive acts. They're driven around the pole star by the wind and will continue to be so until the end of creation. The solution is quite obvious, actually. Because, note that Bhagavatam does not equate Dhruvaloka or pole star with any of the object that is observable with naked eyes. Meaning, when reading these verses, let's not designate the pole star as Polaris. Okay. So much about the pole star. There is another apparent consequence that is resulted from the precession of the equinox. The equinoxes are the 2 points where the equatorial plane intersects the eclipse. You can visualize from this illustration as the spin axis of the Earth, which is the red dashed line here, describe its precessional circle. The equinoxes will shift relative to the constellations of the zodiac. This is a clockwise motion with respect to the stars, as viewed from above the northern hemisphere. This motion is showed by this pair of arrows here. Nowadays, the sun is in the constellation Pisces. Pardon me? I really can't hear you. Why is what?
Why is the equator celestial equator, not just equator, which is the Earth?
Celestial equator is the plane of the Earth equator. Like you put it in a space, it's not just restrained to the Earth, but it's a plane. You can see a plane in the space. It's called celestial equator. Thank you. Thank you. So nowadays, the sun is in the constellation Pisces at the spring equinox. Around 3,000 years ago, the sun was in the constellation Aries at the spring equinox. Yeah, let me show you again a simulation. So let's try to find the equinox, spring equinox. To this, let us take off the atmosphere and also take off, pull over a couple of lines. The equator and the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the sun's annual trajectory as seen from the Earth. So you can see there are 2 lines right here in the sky. Let me also take off the horizon and we switch a perspective so that we are perpendicular to the celestial equator, so that the north celestial pole is right overhead. And you can see here where the orange line, the ecliptic, intersects with the equator at this 0-degree point. This is the spring equinox. And let me turn on the constellations, labels, and arts. You can see this equinox is around, give me a moment. Yeah, it's around the constellation Pisces. Now, if we turn a little bit backwards in time, for example, back to Srila Prabhupada's time, you may notice that this equinox point moves a little bit to the left. with regard to the Pisces, the constellation Pisces. And in 1500, Mahaprabhu's time, it moves a little bit even further to the left. Let's see where it is located back 3,000 years ago. You can see now it's moved over here in the constellation Aries. It's no longer in Pisces. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Just in case we run short of time. Yeah, question at the end, yeah. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we have these verses. When the sun passes through Mesha, Aries, and Tula, Libra, the durations of day and night are equal. When it passes through the 5 signs headed by Vrishabha, Taurus, the duration of the days increases until Cancer, and then it gradually decreases by half an hour each month until day and night again become equal in Libra. When the sun passes through the 5 signs, beginning with Vrishchika, Scorpio, the duration of the days decreases until Capricorn, and then gradually it increases month after month until day and night become equal in Aries. We just saw that due to the precession, the equinoxes shift relative to the constellations of the zodiac. They're not always in the same constellations over time. In these 2 verses, the equinoxes are described to be at Mesha and Tula without mentioning any type of change. Does it mean that the Srimad Bhagavatam description is applicable only within a certain time range? Well, not necessarily. The Srimad Bhagavatam verses adopt the tropical zodiac. In the tropical zodiac, the signs were chosen as 30-degree divisions of the ecliptic. Just like a clock face, every 30 degree is marked with a number to indicate the time. And in the tropical zodiac, the beginning of the sign Aries is defined to be the spring equinox. So Aries refer to the region on the ecliptic from 0 degree to 30 degree. It does not refer to a cluster of stars. Therefore, the signs are also moving with respect to the constellation, the fixed background stars, as the equinoxes change. In conclusion, the equinoxes keep changing, but Srimad Bhagavatam remain stable. Thus far, we've talked about the size and the age of the universe, the Bhumandala, the sun, and the Dhuvaloka. there is another entity that is closely related to our life on this planet. What is it? Yes, you got it? Even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that among the stars, I am the moon. And then in chapter 11, Arjuna responded, the sun and the moon are your eyes. So next, let us embark on our final topics, which is related to Soma. Soma and the movement of the moon. Soma, the moon god, is the son of Atri Muni, who is directly born from Lord Brahma. He is the husband of 27 daughters of Daksha in his second birth. He has a son, Buddha, who is the husband of Ela, also known as King Sudumna, the grandson of the sun god Vivasvan. So the descendants from the Moon dynasty, in this sense, also trace their ancestors in the Sun dynasty. From his lineage, we have Satyavati, who is the parental grandmother of Parashurama, an avatar of Lord Vishnu. We cannot forget that from his lineage came Svayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna. This picture shows Soma, the moon god, feeding nectar to baby Marisha with the nectar that flowed from his finger. Marisha later became the wife of the 10 Pachetas, who are the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. And she gave birth to Daksha in his second birth. The moon god, while he was feeding Marisha, baby Marisha, maybe he was not aware that he was actually feeding the mother of his father-in-law. We may not notice that the moon has an enormous influence on our life. Srimad Bhagavatam says, the moon is the source of nectarine coolness that influences the growth of food grains. And therefore, the moon god is considered the life of all living entities. He is consequently called Jiva, the chief living entity within the universe. Because the moon is full of all potentiality, it represents the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The moon is the predominating deity of everyone's mind, and therefore the moon god is called Manomaya. He is also called Annamaya because he gives potency to all herbs and plants. And he is called Amrita Maya because he is the source of life for all living entities. The moon pleases the demigods, pitas, human beings, animals, birds, reptiles, trees, plants, and all other living entities. Everyone is satisfied by the presence of the moon. Therefore, the moon is also called Sarva Maya, all-pervading. Where is the moon located in the Bhagavatam context? And how fast does it travel? Srimad Bhagavatam describes, above the ray of the sunshine by a distance of 100,000 yojanas. This is the width of the first island. It's the moon, which travels at a speed faster than that of the sun. In 2 lunar fortnights, the moon travels through the equivalence of a samvatsara of the sun. In 2¼ days, it passes through a month of the sun. And in 1 day, it passes through a fortnight of the sun. In this way, the moon passes through each constellations of stars in 30 muhurtas, an entire day. Note that the constellations of stars in this verse refers to the nakshatrams. There are 27 nakshatrams, as many as the wife of the moon god. Sometimes it is also said there are 28 nakshatrams, if adding Abhijit. From these 2 verses, we can know that the moon is about 13 times faster than the sun in terms of angular velocity as observed from the Earth. It completes its 360 degrees revolution with respect to the background stars in about 27 days. Here is what we can know from empirical observation. As the moon orbits the Earth in a counterclockwise direction, it returns to the same place relative to the background stars about every 27.3 days. It returns to the same place relative to the sun about every 29.5 days. Why there is a difference of 2 days? Remember we said that relative to the background stars, both the sun and the moon are orbiting the Earth in a counterclockwise direction. The sun completes its rotation in 1 year, and the moon completes its rotation in 1 month. So, when the moon is back to the starting point after 27 days, the sun is already ahead of the starting point. The moon thus needs to go an extra 2 days to catch up with the sun. This is similar to the concept of solar day and sidereal day that we talked about in yesterday's presentation. As we probably all know, the moon goes through phases. The phases of the moon even appears in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami said, O Maharaja Parikshit, best of the Bharatas, the constellations named Kritika were all wives of the moon god. However, because Prajapati Daksha had cursed him to suffer from a disease causing gradual destruction, the moon god could not beget children in any of his wives. Thereafter, the king of the moon pacified Prajapati Daksha with courteous words, and thus regained the portions of light he had lost during his disease. Nevertheless, he could not beget children. The moon loses its shining power during the dark fortnight, and in the bright fortnight, it is manifest again. According to the lunar calculation, 2 fortnights, one of the waxing moon and the other of the waning, forms 1 month. This animation on the left shows the entire cycle of the moon phases. The illustration on the right lists the typical terms of different phases. When the moon is completely dark to us, it is called a new moon. When it is completely bright to us, it is called a full moon. The waxing moon has a dark left side and a bright right side. The waning moon has a bright right side and a dark left side. There is a simple way to simulate the lunar phases. You can hold a ball. Let me see if I can get a ball. Unfortunately, I find one. You hold a ball in your hand at your arm's length, represents the moon, and your head represents the earth. And find a source of light to represent the sun. Now, you spin counterclockwise, like this. And as you spin, you look at the ball in your hand. You will see that the ball goes through different combinations of its bright and dark phases, just as the moon does. The fact is, half of the moon is always illuminated by the sun. The other half, away from the sun, is always in darkness. The amount of this illuminated half that is seen by us on Earth depends on the moon's position in its orbit with regard to the sun. Here, at this position 1, you can see the ball will be completely dark to us. So this is a new moon. As we turn to position 2, you'll see that the ball has a dark left side and a bright right side. So this is the waxing moon. You turn further, at position 3, you'll see the ball is completely bright to you, and this is the full moon. Turn further when you reach position 4, you'll see the ball has a bright left side and a dark right side. This is the waning moon. This may remind us of the concept of tithi in Vedic timekeeping. It is said here, one tithi ends and another begins when the angular distance between the sun and the moon increases by 12 degrees every time. So a complete circle means 360 degrees. You divide 360 by 12, so we have 30 tithis in each lunar month. These 30 tithis are divided into two fortnights. From the full moon to the new moon, this is one fortnight. And from the new moon back to full moon, this is another fortnight. And within each fortnight, we have 15 tithis. Each tithi has a distinct name. Ekadashi, for example, is the 11th tithi in a fortnight. We know Eka is 1, Dasha is 10, so Eka plus Dasha is 11. Note that the duration of tithi is not always 24 hours. Some say it ranges from 19 to 26 hours. If someday you find a time to observe the moon in the sky, you may find that sometimes we see the moon at night. Sometimes we see it during the day. And sometimes do not see it anywhere. What is the reason? The reason is our day and night are decided by the rising and the setting of the sun. And the relative position of the moon with respect to the sun is changing over the month. Remember that we said, apparently, the sun and the moon and the background stars orbit the Earth in a clockwise direction on a daily basis. For the new moon, as seen from the Earth, it is aligned with the sun in terms of the clockwise daily rotation. So, its rising and setting is aligned, almost synchronized with the sun. For the full moon, it is directly opposite to the sun in terms of the clockwise daily rotation. So, when the sun rises, it sets. When the sun sets, it rises. For the waxing moon, you can see it is behind the sun in terms of the clockwise daily rotation. So, its rising and setting are behind the sun, later than the sun. For the waning moon, it is ahead of the sun in terms of the counterclockwise motion. So its rising and setting are earlier than the sun. As you can see, for example, starting from the new moon, each day the moon falls behind the sun a little bit. And as a result, the rising and the setting of the moon occur later than the sun each day, than the day before, until 30 days later, when the moon goes back to the new moon position. That's when its rising and setting are synchronized with the sun again. If you go to see the moon, what you may also notice is that sometimes we see the bright part of the moon on the higher end, and sometimes we see the bright part of the moon on the lower end. It's not always in the middle. What is the reason? Well, one explanation is the moon orbits the Earth in a plane that is tilted by about 5 degrees relative to the plane in which the sun orbiting the Earth. As you can see, highlighted in orange, there's a 5-degree inclination. Thus, the moon is sometimes above the sun and sometimes below the sun. When the moon is above the sun, its bright side is on the lower end. And when it's below the sun, its bright side is on the higher end. Another illustration. Here is the plane of the sun's orbit. Shri Shri Radha Damodar Ki Jai. Let's continue. Here's the plane of the sun's orbit, and this one is the plane of the moon's orbit. These two are intersecting at an angle of 5 degrees. Because of this inclination, you can see the moon spends most of its time either above the plane or below the plane. The only time when the moon and the sun are aligned in the same plane is at this line of nodes. The 2 points at which the moon crosses the plane of the sun's orbit are called the nodes of the moon's orbit. The ascending node is where the moon moves above the sun, and the descending node is where the moon moves below the sun. Note, although the moon has many phases, it only has one face. We've introduced that it takes about 27 days for the moon to complete one rotation around the Earth with respect to the background stars. It so happens that it also takes about 27 days for the moon to rotate once on its spin axis. As a result, the moon does not seem to be spinning, but appears to us to be keeping almost perfectly still. As we may have experienced, the moon and the sun have eclipses. Just last month, we observed a solar eclipse. Not at all to our surprise, Srimad Bhagavatam also talks about the eclipses. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear king, some historians, the speakers of the Puranas, say that 10,000 yojanas below the sun is a planet known as Rahu, which moves like one of the stars. The presiding deity of that planet, who is the son of Simhika, is the most abominable of all asuras. But although he is completely unfit to assume the position of a demigod or planetary deity, he has achieved that position by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Who is Simhika? If you go to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 18, you'll find the name Simhika. She is the sister of Prahlad Maharaj. Yes, you got it. The sun globe, which is a source of heat, extends for 10,000 yojanas. The moon extends for 20,000 yojanas. And Rahu extends for 30,000 yojanas. Formerly, when nectar was being distributed, Rahu tried to create dissension between the sun and moon by interposing himself between them. Rahu is inimical towards both the sun and the moon, and therefore he always tried to cover the sunshine and moonshine on a dark moon day and full moon night. After hearing the sun and moon demigods about Rahu's attack, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, engaging his disk, known as the Sudarshana Chakra, to protect them. The Sudarshana Chakra is the Lord's most beloved devotee and is favored by the Lord. The intense heat of its effulgence, meant for killing non-Vaishnavas, is unbearable to Rahu, and therefore he flees in fear of it. During the time Rahu disturbs the sun or moon, there occurs what people commonly know as an eclipse. Empirical observation. In order for a solar eclipse to occur, the moon needs to stand right in the middle of the sun and the moon, and therefore it casts its shadow on the surface of the moon, Earth. This requires two conditions. First, it is a new moon day. And second, the sun and the moon has to be aligned on the same plane. If the moon is either above or below the sun, like these two configurations, its shadow does not cast on Earth, and so we cannot see a solar eclipse. Similar for the lunar eclipse, in order for a lunar eclipse to happen, we need the Earth to stand right in the middle of the sun and the moon. And therefore the Earth will cast its shadow on the moon. This similarly requires two conditions. First, it is a new moon day. And the second, the moon and the sun has to be aligned on the line of notes. Otherwise, you can see the shadow of the Earth cannot cast on the moon if the moon is either above or below the sun's plane. Because the sun and the moon are not always aligned on the same plane, on a full moon day or on a new moon day. Therefore, it is not that we have a lunar eclipse every full moon day or a solar eclipse every new moon day. This shows the progression of a total solar eclipse. You can visualize that both the sun and the moon are orbiting the Earth in a counterclockwise direction with respect to the background stars. The sun goes slower than the moon, or you can say the moon goes faster than the sun. And in the situation of a solar eclipse, the moon gradually catches up with the sun from behind, passes the sun, and overtakes it. So you can see the dark area of the sun starts from the right side. Here is the solar eclipse seen from the space. This is the surface of the Earth, and on that surface there is a tiny area that is in darkness. The moon passes between the sun and the Earth from our point of view on Earth, casting its shadow on a certain small area on the surface of the Earth. You can see when the moon blocks out the sunshine, it casts two different types of shadows. One is this larger, lighter shadow that extends at an angle. And the other is this narrower, darker shadow that is right behind the moon. Only within this tiny area where the dark inner shadow hit the surface of the Earth, we can see a total solar eclipse. In any place in this larger, lighter shadow, we cannot observe the total solar eclipse. Now, let me show you a demonstration. We will go back to the 8th of April, 2024 at noontime. And we will be going to Bloomington, Illinois. So let's first go to Bloomington, Illinois. Okay. And we go back in time to April 8th at 12 p.m. Oops. Pause a little bit. Yeah, let's pause here. Okay, let's now find the sun. Okay, he's here overhead. And let's take off the atmosphere so that we can see the sky. Now, this is the sun. Let's give it a close-up. Oh, this is too big. Okay, this is good. You can see the new moon, the dark moon, is almost around the corner. He is on the right side of the moon. And let me speed up time. You can see the moon is moving towards the sun from behind, catches up with it, and passes it, overtakes it. Okay. That's how the progression of the total solar eclipse look like. Now, we go back to the slides. Solar eclipse reminds us of Krishna, his reunion with the residents of Vrindavan. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 82, it describes the Yadavas and many other kings met at Kurukshetra during a solar eclipse and discussed topics concerning Lord Krishna. Krishna met Nanda Maharaj and the other residents of Vrindavan at Kurukshetra and gave them great joy. You can see, here is Krishna, here is Balaram, and presumably this is Nanda Maharaj. Now this graph demonstrates the progression of a total lunar eclipse. Just as in solar eclipse, it involves the moon catching up with the sun from behind. In the lunar eclipse, it involves the moon catches up with the Earth's shadow from behind. So you can see this dark area of the moon starts from the left side. As the Earth blocks out the sunshine, it similarly casts two types of shadows. One is the larger, lighter outer shadow, and the other is the darker inner shadow. You can visualize that the moon orbiting in a counterclockwise direction, and it enters into this lighter outer shadow of the Earth. Here, the surface of the moon only gets slightly darker, almost unnoticeable. And then it enters into the dark, full shadow, and part of it becomes dark. Then it completely get engulfed in the dark shadow and turn red. Okay, let's see a demonstration. We will go back to Bloomington again 2 years ago on the 15th of May, 2022 at 8 p.m. Bloomington, Illinois. And we go back to 2022, May 15 at 8:30 p.m. Okay. Give me a second. Let's take off the atmosphere so that we can see the sky. Let's find the moon. Oh, here is it. Right on the eastern horizon. Okay, let's give it a close-up. Okay, now I will speed up time and pay attention to the moon. See, he is now entering into the outer shadow and is getting a little bit slightly darker. And now enter into the full dark shadow, and part of it turns dark. Now completely engulfed in the dark shadow and turns red. Oh, sorry. And let's go back a little bit. Yeah. Now it's getting out of this darker shadow and get out of the lighter shadow. Now he is back. Assume its normal condition. Okay, that's the demonstration. Lunar eclipse reminds us of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in this world during a solar eclipse. In Srimad Bhagavatam introduction, Srila Prabhupada writes, when Lord Chaitanya was born during the lunar eclipse, all the India was roaring in the holy sound of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So with the vibration of the holy name, we end our astronomy tutorial with Srimad Bhagavatam session. Once again, my humble obeisances to you all. Thank you very much for giving your time and attention. Srila Prabhupada said in one of his lectures, one who is Krishna conscious, he is conscious of everything, and he knows how to deal with them. This is called daksha. Not that because I have become Krishna conscious, I have no knowledge in other things. No, you must have, if not complete, to know something of everything. That is intelligence. To know something of everything, and to know everything of something, that is wanted. I hope this session helped you get to know just a little bit something of astronomy for the purpose of inspiring appreciation and strengthening your relationship with Srimad Bhagavatam. As you may have seen, that simply from the perspective of astronomy, the depth and vastness of knowledge that Srimad Bhagavatam touches upon is incredible. I pray all the best to your eternal journey back home, back to Godhead, happily serving the divine couples, Sri Guru and Sri Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. We're right on time, so we have to take offline questions.